Being great at sales is essential to your business and your career, but you and I both know that the stress of selling and dealing with constant rejection can be an emotional drain. My entire brand, No BS Selling, is based on the belief that professional sales is a skill and not a personality, and that to be better at sales takes constant refinement and a dedication to your craft. This show is for salespeople and entrepreneurs who are committed to improving their sales skills and getting better results, and are sick and tired of the BS game that often happens between buyers and sellers. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll help you and your sales team make selling easier, feel less cheesy, and be more lucrative. It's time to change the rules and level the playing field between you and the people you sell to. You're already good. Let's be better. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. Today, my guest is Merit Kahn. Merit is the founder and principal of Merit-Based Business. She's also does stand-up comedy. I've known Meredith for probably 15 years. We used to work together at a training company years ago. She is a badass, and she's going to talk to us today about sales mindsets. So listen today to learn about how to have better, stronger sales mindsets. Welcome, Merit, to the No BS Sales Podcast.
Well, thank you, Walker. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really glad to have you too. I know it took a little while for us to get together. Tell me a couple of things. One, you've got a sales training background. How in the world did you get into sales training to start with?
Well, I got into sales training because I was actually working in the radio advertising business. And my manager at the time, when he left the radio business, he opened up a sales training franchise and he planted a seed and he said, "You'd be really good at this." And I thought, yeah, but I love radio advertising. But I enrolled as a student and I learned and I sat and I absorbed every single class. And at one point it just clicked and I saw whatever it was that he saw. And I thought, yeah, I probably could do this. And he gave me a chance to teach a class because I had been a participant and a student for a couple of years at that point. And I had more fun than you're allowed to have at work. And that was how I got it.
It's so funny. My experience is very similar to yours. I was a client before I got into this thing. And I was like, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So you mentioned something to me and something I've watched you online. You advertise that you're a stand-up comedian.
I am.
I know that would help. That's a great advantage in training, but tell me how you got into that and what you like about it. What does that give you?
Yeah, well, how I got into it. So my neighbor, who was an accountant and not particularly one of the funniest people you would have met, she did a stand-up comedy course. And I went and I was in her audience and I could not believe how funny she was. And I thought, if she could learn that, I could probably learn that. And I took a class and I learned from a real professional comedian how to observe things in my world and turn them into funny things. And I did my first 7-minute set back in 2014 and I was hooked. What I really loved about that class was it was focused on personal experiences. So instead of just like a Seinfeld, right. What's the deal with old people backing out of their driveway? It was really about, looking at your life. And my instructor, her name is Christina Hall. I highly recommend her class. But she really encouraged us to look at things in our life that were frustrating or troubling to us. If you think about that saying where tragedy plus time equals comedy, that was really the theory. So we looked at things that were sort of tragic in our lives. We let some time pass, and then we could allow ourselves to see what's funny about that. And if after that experience, I was really never able to look at things in a different way. So losing a sale, there was something funny about that.
Absolutely.
I was able to relate that back to my client work and help them find the funny things in situations that went awry.
It's such a great skill to have, especially in the world of sales when you're selling big, complex things, because it's so easy to get down and to get beat up. And our job is to hear no 90% of the time. So It's a great thing to be able to be resilient through humor. And I'm not as skilled at that as you are, but I love the thought process there. I'm going to have to look more into stand-up comedy class here locally. So the work that you do outside of comedy, what do you help people with? You work with mindsets. Tell me about that. What is a sales mindset? What does that mean?
For years I used to say in training classes, there's 3 things that are important to being successful in sales: attitude, behavior, technique. Yep. And then I would say, of all 3 of those things, which one's most important? And pretty much 98% of the time they would say attitude. And I would say, great. But I didn't know how to teach attitude. So I taught behavior and technique for a whole year.
Right.
I was like,
yes.
Great. Attitude, that's the right answer. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
Well, it frustrated me. It bothered me that I couldn't really help people shift their mindset. And when I say attitude, I don't mean good attitude or bad attitude. I mean the open mindset to the possibility of more, better, different.
Yeah. Abundance, right?
And so I started studying emotional intelligence. I got certified probably about 12 years ago from a company called MHS. They're based out of Toronto, and they've done the most research and science behind emotional intelligence, because you could go to Barnes & Noble and buy a $5, fill in the blank thing and get a sense of your emotional intelligence. But this is such a critical aspect of sales mindset that it really does make sense, not only to do a scientifically backed assessment, but to have it debriefed with somebody who's skilled and trained in how to relay that information directly to a sales profession.
Yeah.
And I think that the sales mindset becomes the foundation that you layer those good skills and actions on top of. So if you think about it, like when I'm explaining it to people and they can see me visually, I hold up my hand and I say, if you spread your fingers apart, you could see that there's gaps between each finger. Yeah. Well, if I teach you a good skill, a sales skill, a questioning technique, or how to set an expectation, and you have gaps in your sales mindset, that skill is going to fall through those gaps. It won't be there in that moment that you need it. So if you put your fingers together, and that represents strengthening the foundation, your sales mindset, then those skills layer right on top. They're there when you need them. So if I teach you a questioning technique and I've layered that on top of somebody who has assertiveness at a strong enough level, then they're going to be able to use those questioning techniques. But if your assertiveness, as an example, is low, it doesn't matter what I've taught you to say. Right. You won't get the words out.
Can't make it come out of their mouth. You can teach them all the good stuff in the world, but if they have that weakness, they can't make it come out of their mouth.
Exactly.
So when you did that, when you hired that company and you took the emotional intelligence test, what did you learn about yourself that surprised you?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. Here's what I learned. I learned, I probably already knew about myself that I'm off the charts with optimism. I'm one of the more optimistic people you'll meet. What I didn't really appreciate in my own wiring was how unbalanced that was with another attribute called reality testing. So I'll paint that picture. High optimism, low reality testing. That is not really a good recipe for sales success, right?
Sounds like it. Yeah, sounds like a risk taker or something too, right? And also a whole bunch of happy years as well, right?
Happy years, exactly. So somebody would say to me, "That sounds great, Merit. We're really interested in your sales course," and I'd be like, on my way home, spending my commission.
Yes,
which I didn't get yet, by the way. I was just really sure that it would happen. Yeah. So what I learned, because I had that black and white data, there was no room to be in an argument with reality when I saw on paper how high my optimism was and how low my reality testing was. But what it allowed me to do, that insight, was to bring those two things in balance. And when I was able to bring them in balance, which just meant I had to be more deliberate, I had to lean into the assertiveness skill that I did have and use that to say, I appreciate that you're excited about this. Let me just ask you a few questions to make sure I haven't missed anything, right? And now I was able to lean into my optimism, lean into that assertiveness, but bring up that lower score in reality testing so that it didn't sabotage my sales.
I think it's interesting. A lot of the sales training that you and I both do is to slow salespeople down.
Oh,
And it's funny how slowing the salesperson down can speed up our sales cycle, which seems counterintuitive. But the more that we can question and be a little bit skeptical and not let our own shit get in the way, the better. Because you're right. If we have these happy years, if we think, oh, this is going to be different, then it's another time we're about to waste a whole bunch of time and not get paid.
yeah, exactly.
So right now in your current business, you actually do seminars out west in Denver for my sales mindset. Tell me more about that. What do you do? How do people get there? And not how they get there, but what is it that draws people to that? And what do they learn when they're there?
A couple of things. So I do these 2-day sales intensives or experiential training sessions. I do them about 4 times a year in Denver, and then I'll take them on the road when necessary. But the course actually starts before they get into that room. So as soon as somebody enrolls, we do a whole program one-on-one really to dive deep into their sales mindset. So there's online curriculum, there's an emotional intelligence assessment, there's a debrief with me. And in that process, they begin to open their mind to new possibilities, and they have an opportunity to get really clear and see in reality how their particular emotional intelligence wiring shows up in their real day-to-day selling. So they come to the course. So imagine it's a small class, no more than 10 people. And so they come into that room with everybody who's had their own individual but shared experience, right? Then when I'm teaching sales skills, I've already studied the specific emotional intelligence patterns of the people in that room that day. And I will teach based on the trends that I see in the room. So it allows me to, I used to teach, the same way of teaching a sales skill to whoever showed up in the room that day. And now it's much more prescriptive. And there are certain universal principles I'm always going to teach, but I might teach it in a slightly different way because I know that everybody in this room or the majority of people lack assertiveness or they're low on optimism or self-regard or whatever it is. So I'll look at those trends. And then we'll spend a day on the mechanics of selling or a day and a half really, and then a half a day on building your action plan. So everybody leaves with their 90-day plan. But then we don't stop there. We get together as a group in a virtual platform on Zoom, and we do 3 months of follow-up so that people have a chance to see what they've learned, put into action, and start to see some shifts happening.
What are some typical things that you see, Merit, I know everybody's different, but is there a typical, give me an example of a poor mindset or something that needs, that you can directly account or attribute towards this has to be addressed in sales? Because I want the NoBS sales team, the audience, to kind of hear some specifics or not, but just something they can take away.
Okay. So I'll give you an example. Woman I was coaching was preparing a proposal for a client, and she had negotiated down the price of the proposal because she had some beliefs about money. And so that was happening sort of before I got to her.
Let me stop for a second. I want to explain what that means. It means that the normal price might be $1,000, but she begins to think, gosh, it seems like a lot for my service. I don't know if I'm worth that. I tell you what, I'm going to mark it down to, first they go to $999.99, then all of a sudden they're at $750. And if somebody goes, that's too expensive, they go, you're right, and charge $300, right? And isn't that what you're talking about?
Bingo, exactly. So that was her experience prior to meeting me. Then I don't actually recall how she ended up in the course, but she ended up doing the sales mindset course. And I break that course. There's 3 parts of a sales mindset.
Yep.
So the first part is the internal mindset. That's what we say to ourselves. And that was the piece that had her realize she had these beliefs about money that were sabotaging her sales. The second piece of a sales mindset is your behavioral mindset. And that is what our actions say to other people. So if you think about, and many of your listeners have probably been exposed or studied DISC. there's a way of behaving that helps or hinders your sales and
correct.
All
it's
of
your
that.
hardwire of how you're going to react and communicate. Yes,
exactly. And then the third piece is that emotional mindset, and that is really understanding your own emotions and how and the impact you have on other people. So she's learning all this. She recognized that she was her sabotaging internal mindset was what was contributing to her lowering the price without her ever asking the prospect a question. She also recognized that her behavioral style was to give a lot of detail, but the person that she was selling to was very bottom line. So that was going to, hurt her as well. But then her emotional mindset, I'm trying to think of exactly her profile, but I do remember that she was lower on impulse control, which is another one of the emotional intelligence attributes.
Yeah.
And lower on optimism, kind of in the middle of the road with optimism, not super high, not super low, but middle of the road with that, but low on impulse control. So she wasn't seeing a possibility that they would say yes to the higher number. So she immediately lowered the price. It was that combination of low impulse control and the low money mindset, and bam, that was like the perfect storm for her. And she was going to lower the rates. We did some coaching. We fixed it. She went in there with the higher price, actually a higher price than she was even originally going with.
Love
and
that.
The client, it was actually the best thing for the client. It's not like she was just charging $2,000 because she improved her mindset for something that was only worth $1,000. It was, she had taken away things that were going to be useful to that client, but only because it was hard for her to get that number out of her mouth. And so she actually got a better price and a better solution for her client by checking in with herself. I think if I could just sum all of that up in one sentence, it would be, we spend a lot of time figuring out how to influence other people and precious little time understanding what has influence over us. And
Really?
That's the essence of sales mindset.
I think that's absolutely brilliant and so necessary. And you're right. You can read books about that, but I think it really does take often one-on-one coaching, just even if you're fairly self-aware, just to break that stuff down. And all of our relationship, you use the money example, all of our relationships with money are, I say all of us, I'll just speak for me, are awkward. I mean, my father used to ask, and he did it, I think, just to get people. He would always ask them what they paid for stuff. It's a beautiful house. How much you pay for it? That's a beautiful car. And my mother would just lose her mind. She's like, don't ever talk about money. And so I'm caught somewhere in the middle of that. And, but it's interesting to watch. And I'm developed a better money concept, but I think everybody gets to a certain threshold, right? I'm okay talking about money 0 to X, but above X, it couldn't be that much.
Yeah.
One of the things one of my coaches does is talk to me about is, raise your price, which should allow you, I think you just hit on this, should allow you to do better work, to do deeper work, to do more work, instead of lowering your price and having to discount your work. And so I think it's so important. And a lot of people do that, right? They don't give themselves the credit for it.
Right, exactly. I like to think that the more I learn, the more value I have to give. So one of the top 5 emotional intelligence attributes of top performing people is actually called self-actualization. And that's really your ability to realize your potential capacity and and striving for growth. So I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's work on mindset.
Okay.
Her book is called Mindset, and she talks about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
So, really just, and for me, it was that growth mindset is part of being open, right? An open mind.
Explain the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset for those that may not know what that is.
Yeah. So a fixed mindset is, I'm not good at sales. I'm a tech person. I'm a people person. I'm a this or a that. And so you don't allow yourself any room to become something more in an area where you may not naturally feel, competent.
Yeah, because you are, right? You're just status quo. This is who I was born. This is where I'm from. It's your excuse box, basically.
Right. And a great example, I would have said about myself, I'm not really a tech person. You know, I shy away from technology. It's not my happy place. You know, it's just not the way that I'm wired. And recently I made the switch from all PC to all Apple. I switched my CRM system. I switched a lot of technology, and I did it all at once. I figured if I'm going to go into the deep end and be uncomfortable, I'm going to be uncomfortable with all of it and move past it.
Yep.
And what actually happened was, because I do have a growth mindset, thankfully, I thought, you know what, I wouldn't have known myself to be comfortable here, but I know I can learn this. And then I just learned it.
So tell me, and I got that, and I've always assumed, well, because of the business, right? If you're one who goes to get sales training, you have and maybe it reaches a certain point, but if you reach out for help, you have a growth mindset. But is it a choice that you make, or are there steps to go to develop a growth mindset? Where's the switch there? Is it a switch?
You know, that's a great question. I think it may be different for different people. I don't know that there's necessarily a formula to a growth mindset, but I will tell you that one thing that helps is getting accurate data about where you are right now, because as an example on that emotional intelligence assessment, there are very specific scientifically backed questions that can be asked of a person to let you know how open are you to learning and growing and seeing more potential for yourself, especially as related to the general population or the professional population. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see where you match up. But I will tell you, for me personally, what had me be unafraid of making all these technology changes when I didn't know myself to be tech savvy, I had a completely different experience in a completely different realm where I experienced I did something that I didn't know I could do. And because of that experience, I actually had an opportunity to relate to myself in a new way. Like, if I could do that thing, well, of course I can do this other thing.
All right, I'm gonna probe into you here, and you can raise your hand and say, I don't want to go there, but was it something that you had a skill in that you didn't know you had a skill in, or is it something that you worked hard and were able to develop the skill? Or am I completely off base on both those things?
It's a combination of both. So I'll tell you the real example, the real situation. Yeah. I wrote a one-woman show. I wrote I wrote a 70-minute, 1-hour comedy show about my life. Wow. Prior to doing that, I had never written anything like that. I had performed, in comedy, they call it a tight 10. I had a tight 20. I had 20 minutes of solid comedy I knew would have you rolling in the aisles. Yep. But I did not have a full performance with sets, props, costume changes. I had never written anything like that. Well, I did. Like, I wrote, I got help, I held myself accountable. I had a writing schedule. It was a passion project. No one was paying me for this, but I did it. And then after the performance and the reactions of people and you know what I was experiencing myself, I realized, wow, I'm a lot more capable of a lot more things than I knew I was. So what happened out of that one experience was I had an opportunity to see for myself that more was possible, and that I could learn something that I didn't know and have it turn out really, really great.
Yeah. And that specific thing has been life-changing for you, not just the lessons you learned from it, but just creating that 70-minute deal that has had repercussions far beyond just the comedy thing itself in your life, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, now people, it's really fascinating, because now people are asking me to do a training program on how to write the story of your life, which I think is crazy. Like, I've done it one time and now people want to learn from me, but it's interesting. But how, you know, what is it that makes you an expert? Doing it one time, doing it 50 times, 10,000 hours, who knows? But my point was that
it's having somebody trust you enough to give you money to make that problem in themselves go away. That's what makes you an expert.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I think what people resonated with, which is really the same thing with sales training and coaching, is you see more is possible for someone before they are able to even see it.
100%.
And when you can help someone step into that possibility by opening up their mind to what else could be possible for them, then at some point they adopt the beliefs that you have in them, and they become theirs. And those are the moments. It's hard to always know as a coach when that moment's going to happen for people, or how long it's going to take, or what's going to become of it. But I believe that one of the reasons that people have hired me over the 2+ decades I've been doing this is that when I'm sitting down and talking with somebody, I know more is possible, or we wouldn't be in that conversation.
Isn't that fascinating?
And now my job is to just ask you the right questions so that you start to see that possibility too. And really what I've been doing for my whole career, without labeling it quite that way, is helping people open their minds to new possibilities.
I love that, Merit. And that is really, that's super helpful. Can I share with you a couple of things that I have picked up from this? And it really was something that you said about the 3 parts of mindset. The internal mindset is what you say to yourself, and then your behavioral mindset, which are the actions that you actually take, which display what you believe, and then the emotional mindset. And what I didn't understand was the piece of this, which is how other people perceive or what your impact on their emotions is. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's your ability to understand your own emotions and the impact you have on other people.
Got it. Well, I don't know that I'd ever read that way, and that is it's really fascinating. I imagine that at least several people on this podcast would be interested in learning more about your the mindset course that you have. How would somebody find you, Merit? How would they find you? I'm
easy to find. I'm on my website is meritbasedbusiness.com. It's MERIT, like a certificate of. Merit. Everything I do is merit based. So the idea is, no participation trophies here. You want it, you gotta earn it.
Love it.
So meritbasedbusiness.com. And I do have a tab on my website that's specific to the sales mindset course. That course is really you can do it virtually, and and it does have one-on-one coaching with me direct. And it's a nice complement to any sales training methodology that you're learning. This is really the piece that sets a foundation so that all the skills that you learn in your course or other sales courses out there can really work even more effectively for people.
Oh, man, I love that. And I encourage you guys, the No BS sales team, to reach out to Merit if this interests you, because she is super smart. She's very successful. She's helped a lot of other people with just that and a whole lot more. If you want to be in touch with me, you can always reach me at walker@walkermckay.com. I'd love some feedback on this show. I've gotten a bunch of emails from you guys in the past about what you like, what you learned. Helpful to me to know what it is that's resonating with you. I've sent out a newsletter every week, as you all know, with a copy of my podcast and a couple of videos that I do, and then stuff that I'm reading. If you want to be on the newsletter list, it's free. If you text the letters NOBS, no BS, to the number 66866, we will get you on the next one that comes out, which is every Friday. So, Merit, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I know this will be very helpful to other people.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're absolutely welcome.